The Organization of American States condemns the impeachment process against Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. Plus, hundreds of mothers march in Mexico. We'll tell you why. Thanks so much for joining us for teleSur's English. I'm Coddy Weddle. This is From the South. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff took her battle against impeachment to the Supreme Court in a last-ditch attempt to stay in office. Meanwhile, the head of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, spoke during a press conference and condemned the impeachment process. Almagro reiterated that the process was illegitimate, as President Rousseff had not been charged with any crime. Attorney General Eduardo Cardoso asked the Supreme Court to annul the impeachment proceedings, which were launched alleging that the president mismanaged the government's budget. Hundreds of protesters are rallying across Brazil against the impeachment process of President Dilma Rousseff. Demonstrations are planned for today and tomorrow. The Senate Speaker, Renan Calheiros, has said he will continue with the Senate's vote, despite yesterday's decision made by the lower house to annul the impeachment vote. Hundreds of mothers and families of Mexico's more than 27,000 disappeared marched on Tuesday in Mexico City. They protested the government's incapacity to find their loved ones and bring those responsible to justice. This was the 5th annual march. This year, they demanded that legislation be passed with severe sanctions against those who commit forced disappearances. Argentine consumers are boycotting supermarket chains as thousands cannot afford the increasing prices in gasoline, electricity, and food in general. Restaurants have begun offering free food in so-called social fridges to avoid wasting any products and to help low-income families. Social fridges were popular during the nation's economic default between 1999 and 2001. Analysts are warning that the neoliberal policies implemented by President Mauricio Macri are ruining the economy there. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez is in Berlin at an official visit to discuss bilateral ties. Rodriguez met with his German counterpart, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. Both officials discussed the current challenges being faced by the island and commerce between both nations. The German minister criticized the U.S. embargo against the Caribbean island, the blockade, and said it was the biggest obstacle to Cuba and Germany's commercial ties. And Cuban migrants continue crossing the border into Panama, despite Colombia's decision to close its border with that country. Since January this year, authorities in Panama and Costa Rica have urged their neighbors to help them cope with the influx of migrants. Now, Cubans fear that the opening between U.S. and Cuba's relations will change migration benefits awarded to Cuban citizens in the U.S. And Chilean fishermen who have been protesting for the past week due to the lack of response by the government to the losses inflicted by the red tide phenomenon have taken their demands to the capital city of Santiago. Hundreds of activists and people joined the fishermen there. Two of the largest funders of the Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton are featured prominently with offshore bank accounts in the latest Panama paper revelations. Media mogul Haim Saban and hedge manager Donald Sussman have given Clinton's presidential campaign $10 billion. Billionaire Sabab has a long history of funding pro-Israel politicians. Now, the revelations come amid primary elections set for today in West Virginia.
That also makes it difficult to do the work outside the home.
And meanwhile, Democratic candidate Bernie Sanders is set to win primaries in West Virginia later today. The latest polls there show Sanders ahead of Clinton with over 5% of the votes. The victory, however, is still short of the delegates Sanders would need to dispute the Democratic National Convention with Clinton, who is projected to win in the upcoming primaries in California. U.S. President Barack Obama will visit Hiroshima later this month, making him the first serving U.S. president to do that since it was hit by the U.S. nuclear bomb in 1945. According to the White House, Obama wants to highlight his continued commitment to pursuing peace and security in a world without nuclear weapons. The Hiroshima bombing killed 140,000 people. The White House said there would be no apology during the visit. At least 14 people have been killed by new airstrikes on the town of Benish in the Syrian province of Idlib. Now, the strike happened just hours after a ceasefire in the nearby city of Aleppo was extended. A local rebel commander was among those killed. There were no immediate details about other casualties. A car bomb struck an armored police vehicle in the Turkish city of Diyarbakir earlier today. 3 people were killed and 45 others were wounded. Among the wounded were 12 police officers and 5 inmates who were being moved, and the government has labeled it a terrorist attack. Israel's Jerusalem District Court has convicted a 14-year-old Palestinian boy on 2 charges of attempted murder. Ahmed Mansara was arrested after he allegedly carried out a stabbing attack on 2 Israelis. His 15-year-old cousin was shot and killed by police. Armed men, Ahmed may face up to 10 years in prison. Nearly 40 deportees in the Gaza Strip have urged Ban Ki-moon to end the U.S. in their sufferings after 15 years in exile. We turn more now for more on this story from our correspondent, Nor Harrison.
Dozens of Palestinians who were deported from the West Bank city of Bethlehem to the Gaza Strip in 2002 organized a sit-in protest in front of the headquarters of the United Nations in Western Gaza City Tuesday to mark 15 years in exile. The group issued a letter in which they appealed to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for help. Group spokesperson Fehmi Kanan said that he and his colleagues have been suffering bad living conditions since they were sent to exile and have been prevented from traveling and seeing their families. He also expressed disappointment that their issue has been neglected and forgotten by Palestinian leaders.
We are here to send a message to UN Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon to take responsibility regarding our issue. We have been in exile for 15 years now. We previously sent other messages which call for the rights of the Palestinian people. Our deportation is a war crime under international law, and representatives should act to end our suffering.
On April 2, 2002, about 220 Palestinians, including resistance fighters and 40 brides and nuns, took refuge inside the Nativity Church in Bethlehem after Israeli troops surrounded the occupied city. 8 people were shot dead and 27 were injured by Israeli fire, with no respect to the holy place. A deal between Palestinian and Israeli officials ended the 40-day siege of the church and saw the deportation of 39 Palestinians to Europe and the Gaza Strip. Nor Harrison, teleSur's TV, Gaza.
U.S. and Afghan forces have freed the kidnapped son of a former Pakistani prime minister in Afghanistan. Ali Aider Gilani was abducted in 2013 and is the son of Yusuf Rasa Gilani. According to the Afghan government, Gilani was being held by an al-Qaeda-affiliated group. He will be returned to Pakistan following a medical checkup. The new mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has rejected the offer by U.S. presidential hopeful Donald Trump to make him an exception to a ban on Muslims traveling to the U.S.
Well, what's important is that, I'm not treated as some exceptional case. What I want to see is that, decent Muslims from all around the world are able to go to America, and that that Donald Trump doesn't play into the hands of extremists who say it's not possible to be Western and to be Muslim, that there is some sort of...
The French government has used a rarely invoked article of the Constitution to bypass Parliament and forcibly implement a labor reform bill. Now, the decision to use the article was made after the government failed to reach a compromise on the bill with MPs. The controversial reforms will make it easier for employers to hire and fire workers and have provoked months of protests. North Korea held a mass rally and parade to celebrate the end of its first Congress in 36 years. During the ruling party Congress leader Kim Jong-un highlighted North Korea's aim to expand its nuclear arsenal. Kim cemented his role by becoming party chairman. His sister Kim Yo-jong was given a key post in the ruling committee. Men and women from all over the world traveled back in time for the 7th World Championships. Participants competed using weapons from the Middle Ages to the full contact medieval combat. Now, the goal of the event is to recreate the rawness of the medieval battle. 700 knights from 35 countries fought in Prague. Russia took the World Championship title this year. A collection of personal items that belong to film star Marilyn Monroe will go up for auction at Julian's Auctions. The items were left in her will to her acting mentor, Lee Strasberg, and were never auctioned before. Up for grabs are personal notes, address books, and jewelry. Key pieces will be exhibited to the public until the auction in November. And that's what we're covering on this Tuesday. Thanks so much for joining us. Plenty more on all of those stories at our website, telesurtv.net/English. We'll see you back here tomorrow.